This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Stevenson with his own moves. Carrington. North are in front.
Hello and welcome back to North Pod after a win. I actually can't believe it. After 24 podcasts, well, this is the 24th, we have finally the opportunity to react after a win. We won one in round 24, our 23rd game for the year. I know, obviously, we did win those first two games of the year, but I wasn't podcasting. I think round 4 was the first game I did a reaction podcast to, so it's been a lot of losses, but we're finally talking after a North Melbourne win. And the losing streak is over. We've put to bed any talk of tanking. We won comfortably in the end. I'm not sure how we did that in the end, but a win. I honestly can't believe it. Watching that game, I just thought, where has this been all year? My goodness. Yeah, we'll talk obviously more about it as we go through our things. Hopefully it's a bit more of a upbeat, positive vibe, this podcast. I'm still going to go with the same format. We'll go through the negatives first. There's still a bit to talk about there, but I think that there's probably more positives to talk about this week. We'll talk about, whether or not we should have won in that Harley Reid discussion. Yeah, I think most North Melbourne supporters are waking up this morning feeling better. Even though, sure, we've lost 20 in a row, we can go into the postseason with a win, a comfortable win. So it was North Melbourne 132, defeated Gold Coast 97, a 35-point win. I don't remember the last time that we had such a comfortable win. It was probably 2021. Story of the game. Let's talk about it. I think this one's an easy one. It has to be the ball movement with those younger players sort of moving it through the middle and from the back line. An absolute sight to behold. Where has that been all year? And I know, look, in fairness, the last couple of weeks, I had talked about how I'd noticed that we were trying to move it on a bit faster and sort of, handball at all costs. And I think we were building towards a performance like this. But yeah, I would have loved to see more of this earlier in the year. Obviously, the last couple of weeks, it's been mixed success. It hasn't always worked. And I think that was the same today. It didn't always come off, but it just looked so proactive. It looked attacking. It gave our forward the chance. It was just all those young players transitioning it from defence to the forward line. So Powell, Phillips, Lazzaro coming through the middle with Thomas and Simpkin, Scott, Bergman, Goda, Sheasel, Core, all of them, every time they got the ball, they were looking to drive that ball hard and long or handball to someone who's running past and just move the ball on at every opportunity. And that is what allowed Larkey to thrive, and he kicked 9 goals, 3. We'll talk about him in just a minute. But yeah, it was like a different side. The instructions, I guess, must have just been, let's absolutely go for it. Because I feel like the last couple of weeks, it's been more of a, if you think there's an opportunity there, let's play on. Yesterday, I'm recording this Sunday, or around midday on Sunday. Yesterday, the instructions just seemed to be play on at all costs, even if you think it's going to be a bit risky, we're going to back ourselves. And that confidence and that flair just made such a massive difference to the way that the forwards were able to interact with the footy. It wasn't just Larkey. I thought Paul Curtis got better opportunities. Eddie Ford got better opportunities. So yeah, it was just chalk and cheese to what we've seen from the middle part of the year, and showed us, I think, what at least our offensive game style can look like. Still got some question marks over the defence, which we'll talk about, but in terms of scoring, I mean, yeah, we can do it. We did it today. Let's talk about the 3 stars for the last time for this year. If you're a new listener, this is the 2 best performing North Melbourne players and the best opposition player on the day, according to me. And I think first star is an easy one, has to be Nick Larkey. Kicked 9 goals, 3, 21 disposals, 11 marks, 2 tackles, 2 goal assists, and just looked dangerous all the time. And yeah, he was a menace today or yesterday. Just, as I said earlier, the fact that the ball was getting down to him with such speed meant that he had more one-on-one opportunities, or at least even number opportunities. He also got a couple of free kicks, which he hasn't often got this year. I think he might have won 4 free kicks in total. He could have got a couple more, to be honest. There's a couple of times where he got ragdolled off the ball and didn't get rewarded for it, or didn't get a free kick for it. But just what a way to end the season for Larkey. Finishes the year on 71 goals. Has to be a chance for the All-Australian team now. I know he went ahead of Taylor Walker, and then Taylor Walker went and kicked 9 last night on West Coast anyway. So Walker, I think, might have moved on to 76. But I still think, Larkey's he's sitting way ahead of 4th place. He's 3rd place on the Coleman. I think he'd be desperately unlucky not to get into the All-Australian now. Probably on the bench. He's probably one of the interchange players, and that's what makes it a bit shaky. And look, whatever. If he makes it, he makes it. If he doesn't, he doesn't. Like, it's not the be-all and end-all, but I think he absolutely deserves that recognition for the season that he's had. And I mean, yeah, he was playing on Collins today, who's a really good defender. So it's not even, he hasn't chalked up someone who, a side that's lacking key defensive options. He's just kicked 9 goals, 3, could have had a couple more. And yeah, it was a fantastic effort from Larkey, and again, really shows what he can do when the ball actually gets down to him with some pace and gives him a better than even chance. I had a couple of different options for the second star. I've gone with Will Phillips. He had 26 disposals, 4 marks, 3 tackles, 6 clearances, 1 goal assist, 6 inside 50s, went an 89% disposal efficiency, had 20 pressure acts. Just a really well-rounded midfield game, and that's exactly what we've been looking to see from him. He's been a little inconsistent at times, but yeah, it was pretty close for that next star. It could have been Thomas or Powell or Simpkin or Scott. I thought all those mids were really good. I just thought Will, based on how he's been playing recently, it was a fantastic way to end his year. Was probably the most dangerous he's looked all year. He's had one other game that was probably better, so it might be his second best game overall for the year. But I thought his kicking was great today. I thought his in and under work was fantastic, and yeah, I really think he showed when he's playing majority of his time in the midfield, and he's got a bit of time and space, what he can do. He was fantastic. Similar to Powell. Powell was a lot, and we'll talk about them later on. Just the young mids, if they're actually playing midfield time, look like footballers. And I think that's been the challenge all year when we've been experimenting or trying to find a place for some of these younger mids, and mostly having them on the half-forward flank. They haven't looked as good, but yeah, Will Phil had about 70% game time, and most of that he was, playing around the ball and looked fantastic. So he was sensational. In terms of the best Gold Coast player, similarly, there was a couple of mids that it could have gone to. I've given it to Matt Rowell. He had 33 disposals, 9 tackles, 11 clearances, 4 inside 50s, 22 contested possessions. I thought he was their most damaging midfielder. Burst away from stoppage, was a beast around the ball, tackled really well with those 9 tackles. Yeah, he was the one that I guess jumped off the screen to me. I thought Anderson and Flanders were really good at times as well, but the Gold Coast midfielders, whilst they did rack up a few more disposals than the North Melbourne mids for the most part, they weren't able to turn that into scoreboard dominance and put pressure on the North Melbourne side. So, yeah, they accumulated. I thought Rowell was damaging, and Anderson and Flanders had their moments, but I mean, we won the game by 6 odd goals, so you have to think that our midfield did finish out on top. So, yeah, Rowell was the best of them, and Miller actually was relatively quiet. I mean, he wasn't bad, but he was probably their 4th best midfielder. So, yeah, fantastic effort from those players. Before we jump into The negatives, just a reminder to please continue to share me out with any North Melbourne fans. You know, it really helps me get the word out there. Subscribe on your chosen podcast service and leave me a review on Apple or Spotify if you can. It really helps people to see the podcast, and get involved with me on social media at NorthPod Show, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, whatever you want. All right, let's try and whip through the negatives, because I think we want to stay mostly on the positive after this win. But, you know, obviously there's some things to improve on, so we do want to touch on those as well. How many have I got here? 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5. Okay, we can do this. So I thought the start of the game wasn't great. We looked a bit disinterested. We let them get off to a fairly good start, the Gold Coast Suns, and we were a bit sloppy. I thought we were trailing our opposition to the ball too often. And look, it was just a flat start. You know, they got out to a good lead, Gold Coast, and at quarter time it was looking like every other game for the year essentially. Yeah, I mean, the crowd was virtually empty. I've tried to get a number, but the match report still says TBC, and that's probably because they're embarrassed by how low it was. There was hardly anyone there at all. The stands were pretty much empty. It was mostly just the people sort of sitting on the grass, but it looked like a couple of thousand at absolute best. So, you know, there wasn't much of an atmosphere there. It was just, a really flat start altogether. It looked like a bit of a VFL game, to be fair. And yeah, perfect example of our lack of detail on the start was that the way that the Suns kicked their first goal was kicked long into sort of towards the goal square. Eddie Ford just needed to rush that one through for a point, wasn't able to, and Flanders kicks it off the ground for a goal. And we have seen that 3 or 4 times this year. I can think of Darcy Tucker being guilty of one of them, where we just don't seem to be able to read the situation well enough to rush it through. I don't know if we think we're going to get pinged, or if it's, you know, we've just got to be unlucky in terms of the way the ball's bounced a few times. But yeah, I mean, when I saw that, I thought, here we go again. We've seen this movie before. Fortunately, it didn't continue that way. I did think that we really worked our way into the game, and by the end of the first quarter, we looked a bit more lively. But yeah, we can't afford to have those slow starts. We really looked not sharp at all to start the game, and that was what allowed the Gold Coast to kick 3 or 4 and build a little lead in that first quarter. I thought, second negative, particularly in the first half, our whole ground defence was extremely shaky. It was a really interesting contrast, because obviously I was watching on TV. I didn't go down to Hobart. The commentators on Fox were remarking about how well North Melbourne was set up for a full ground zone defence when the Suns were kicking it out. But every time they said that, the Suns just seemed to walk it through to their forward 50. And we've seen that a lot this year, that, you know, our strategy is don't stand the mark, use that player as another one kind of in the zone and blocking space sort of 15, 20 metres off the kick. And yeah, I understand the strategy. It just, at times this year, it has made us look really easy to transition the ball against. And I thought the Suns did that really well today. They just had the capacity to hit those 30-metre passes on an angle and slice through our defence. The Suns scored 97 points in the end. So that's not a great, you know, that's nearly 100. That's not a great return in modern footy. If you really want to be keeping sides to 60 or 70 points if you're going to win. Yeah, man, they scored 97. It just so happened that we were scoring more today. So, yeah, the overall team defense is still a big room for improvement. Potentially it looked even worse today because we have such an inexperienced young group out there. A lot of those young midfielders are potentially not fully two-way runners yet, and I'm not calling out anyone in particular. It didn't seem to me like our zone defense was set up well. I thought that individually our defenders were pretty good today. So it's not like Ben Mackay had a shocker or Core had a shocker, Goda. Like, I thought that in those one-on-one opportunities and when the ball actually did get into the Suns forward line, I thought the defense wasn't too bad. A couple of mistakes, a couple of miscommunications, but nothing horrific. So it's just another thing that I'm really hoping that Clarko is going to tweak moving into next season, is what the whole ground defense looks like, because right now, to me, not standing the mark has not worked super well for us. We essentially seem to not stand the mark until the opposition gets about 60 or 70 metres out from goal. And, I'm okay with that if it's working, but I haven't seen it working yet. So we've really got to work on stopping opposition transition. The rucks were a worry again today. It's been an ongoing issue since we've been playing both Goldie and Cherry in the same side. Early on, Witts was just smashing them both. It was part of the reason why in quarter one Gold Coast were able to get well on top. It did even out as the match went on, but both Goldie and Cherry were getting slaughtered out of the middle at the start. I thought Goldie having his kids there today, I did wonder if that's a bit of a sign that it's potentially his last game for North. Clarko in the post-game press conference seemed to kind of pour cold water on that, but he's hardly going to say, actually, yep, you got us. This is his last one. So we'll see what comes to pass, I suppose. I thought he was okay today, Goldie. Had a couple of really great moments. Took a nice mark. Set up a nice goal. Cherry similarly had bits and pieces, but we definitely need to see more from him. So, yeah, the ruck situation going into the drafting and trade period really interests me. We've got those two, and we've got Hamish Free as our ruck options. Like Jacob Edwards, let's be honest, he's not a ruck or a forward. He's going to be delisted. So they're the three sort of out-and-out rucks on the list. I look at that as an area that we could potentially look to bolster, particularly if Goldie doesn't stay on the list. But yeah, the rucks weren't great today. I thought the mids made the most of some opportunities off Witts and did a good job of sharking. The final stats, we actually won the hit-outs in the end 42-37, but I think we lost the first 8 or 9 hit-outs. We lost the clearances 37-40, so relatively even. But as I said, as the match went on, we evened it up. That was quite a few stats. The tackles were pretty similar. Gold Coast started well out ahead in the tackle front, and then we pulled it back by the end. So it's just another wait and watch on the ruck situation, because I think there's a bit to play out there over the trade period, and I'm sure in future podcasts we can have a look at that. A couple more, not too many more negatives. At the end of quarter two, so just before halftime, there was a bit of a scuffle involving Jai Simpkin and Matt Rowell. It was in our forward 50. Jai Simpkin tried to step Rowell. Rowell got him, caught him holding the ball, and just sort of gave him a bit of a jumper punch while he was on the floor. There wasn't much in it, but that then resulted in a bit of a, not an all-in, but there was probably 10 or so players that were involved in a bit of a push and shove. And I just thought it was one of those moments that could have been a turning point. Turner ended up giving away a 50-metre penalty because he was going into flying the flag and not reading the room, I guess. So that allowed the Suns to transition the ball into their forward line. And I think it was David Swallow who took a mark and then kicked after the siren. Fortunately, he only kicked a point, but it just was so reminiscent of those late quarter mistakes that we've made in recent times that have been really costly. I think about the last game in Hobart against Melbourne when Steve-O's running in to kick a goal and then misses it and it goes up the other end and Melbourne were able to kick a goal and it really sent them into halftime with some momentum. I thought this had some really similar vibes to it. Fortunately, as I said, the Suns weren't able to do it, but that's just one of those ones where you don't want the senior players, Simpkin and Turner, making blunders like that, costing us late in quarters. I get that you want to fly the flag for your teammate and you can't afford to just let them get beat up, but I thought the Suns did a pretty good job there of sort of creating a free kick and creating a 50-metre penalty because of the fact that they didn't get sucked in like we did. So that's just one of those ones that I thought we got away with today, but on other days we haven't. And last negative, and this one I'm only saying half in jest. The wins cost us pick one. It looked like for a moment there that West Coast were gonna win again and beat the Crows and get off the bottom of the ladder, but eventually the Crows pulled away and won comfortably in the end. So we will finish second last with pick 2. I think more so than us losing the number 1 draft pick, which we had in our hands for a week, I'm just more annoyed that we haven't seen a performance like this, 10 weeks ago. Sure, it's great to go into the off season with this positivity and with that winning feeling. I love that, but it would have, this season would have felt a lot differently if we'd picked up this win halfway through rather than having this 20 loss streak to live through. So, yeah, look, we'll go into the draft with pick 2. It's much for muchness, 1 or 2. I know that there is hysteria around pick 1, and while I was watching it, part of me was like, oh, geez, what are we doing here? But, you have to actually remember that footy's about winning, and, the list management stuff will sort itself out. It was just a bit odd to be watching the game, and I was 95% like, gee, this is fantastic. And there was that 5% of me that was like, 1, where's this been all year? I would have loved to see this 10 weeks ago, 20 weeks ago. And 2, what are we doing? Like, this is the this is the one game where I think if we'd lost, we all could have at least drawn the positive from it. So my partner was bemused by that, or annoyed by that. She couldn't get her head around the fact that I wasn't 100% happy after all the losses this year. But yeah, it would have felt, I think, as I've reflected on it, it's just that feeling of I would have loved to have this in the middle of the year to give us something, bit of momentum, bit of vibe going in, throughout the middle part of the year. And I guess probably we deserve to have that in that Sydney game before we accidentally went over the substitute limit. So that's all the negatives. I think we definitely want to move on to the positives because we won after all. So let's be positive. Thing number 1, the ball movement from the back line. It was just a whole different ball game. And I did talk about this in the story of the game part, so I'll come at it from a different perspective. That back line just racked up possessions in a positive way today. So Sheasel had 29, Goda had 22. I'm fairly sure that's a career high for him. Bergman 14, Core 20, Scott 33. And as I said earlier, they just drove it out at all costs. So I didn't have the rebound 50 stats in front of me, but the rebound 50, there's running bounces, long kicks, handballs to people that are, chaining it up. They just linked up superbly with the midfielders. And watching it, maybe this is blasphemy, I don't know, but I wondered if the backline's actually better off without McDonald and Zeeble in it. Not from a defensive perspective, but from an offensive perspective. Because I think, we've seen neither of them have been elite kicks this year. McDonald in particular has been a bit questionable by foot, and I've wondered whether we need to move him out of the defence at times. Zeebel's been a bit better, but erratic, I would say. Look, it's hard to say, I think, because to me, watching that game, the coaching instructions were vastly different to what they've been at other times throughout the year. It was just so clearly play on at all costs, handball, run and carry at all costs. So it's hard to compare, but yeah, having that youth in there and those players that actually can bite off some of those kicks and can run and carry and chain up with handball, it looked tremendous. So, I mean, look, McDonald's going to come back next year. He's our co-captain. He's not going to be out of the side, but I do wonder if there's maybe a spot for him on the wing, or maybe it is okay if we've got... I think it probably depends what our defence looks like next year, like if Mackay's staying, like what happens there. But yeah, having Sheasel go to Bergman, Scott playing that rebounding defender role, and having Core able to play on a second tall and also, have some flair. I mean, he kicked a goal today, which I'm fairly sure was his first North Melbourne goal. It was absolutely, it was sensational. You just looked at that and you went, wow, we've actually got something from defence. Positive number 2, and I touched on this one earlier as well. Look what happens when you can play those young midfielders as midfielders. Powell, Phillips, Lazzaro, none of them were absolute stars today. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that they're the second, third and fourth coming of Chris Judd. Let's rein it in. But they all played significant midfield time today alongside Thomas and Simpkin. And they just looked confident and established. And they looked like they knew the role they were supposed to play. And I think it just makes such a massive difference to those players because they are midfielders. And whilst we might have one or two too many midfielders, I think if you look at what our problem has been this year, we've been trying to play too many of those players out of position so we can get them into the side. Lazzaro and Powell in particular. I think Phillips has mostly been playing midfield when he has been in the side, but he's been in and out. Powell and Lazzaro have been asked to play a lot of half forward, and at times they haven't looked good. But it was definitely Lazzaro's best game for the AFL side for the year, and I think probably Powell's too. Just looked, so much cleaner, like they had time, like they knew what they were being asked to do. And I think, it's a real head scratcher, I think, for the list management team when you look. We've obviously got options here because, sure, we have these players. Obviously, Wardlaw and LDU are going to come straight back in next year. And then we're likely going to have a draftee or two that would play midfield, you would think. Like Riley Sanders, if he's coming in somehow, he's a mid. At the very least. Maybe there's a Harley Reid, depending on what happens. So, I think the midfield balance next year is going to be interesting. Hugh Greenwood and Liam Shields, we know, can also go through there if they're playing in the firsts. So, there's a lot to think about in that midfield. I've talked about the fact that I wondered if we could maybe trade out one of these midfielders and try and get something back for them. Who knows? Maybe Taron Thomas is leaving. I hope not, but I think there's a lot to talk about with our midfield mix going into next year. But it was a really positive performance from those young midfielders. Again, given they weren't getting fantastic service from the rucks either, I didn't think they did a fantastic job of chaining up handball, moving the ball forward. It's just that two-way running that's a bit of a question mark for me at the moment, but we're a long way from a complete outfit, so that is okay. We can get there. Next positive, we scored 132 points. We kicked 20 goals for the game. That is extremely hard to believe. It's the first time we've cracked 100 since 2019. So this year didn't score 100 prior to now. 2022 didn't score 100. 2021 didn't score 100. 2020 we definitely didn't. That was the shortened quarters. Didn't crack 100. So we smashed through it. 132 points. Just all came about due to that fast ball movement, which I talked about earlier. Allowed Larkey all of those opportunities. So he's kicked 9. Eddie Ford managed to kick 3. Curtis kicked 2 and really helped Larkey set up a couple of his. And all of those goals, or almost all of those goals, came in from getting the ball in fast and putting the Gold Coast defence under pressure. We tackled really well inside our 50. We had 12 tackles inside 50. We took 22 marks inside 50. Obviously, a lot of those were Nick Larkey, but there was some Eddie Ford and some Paul Curtis in there as well. Generally, we were lowering our eyes really well going inside 50. I thought Will Phil had a couple of fantastic kicks inside 50, Taron Thomas as well. And it just shows that this forward line has something if we can get some proper efficient supply in there. And, you put Steve-O and Zerha back in there because I firmly believe that, both of those players make our forward line mix more dangerous. And, all of a sudden you go, there's the forward line. Hugh Greenwood was up there today. He did a bit. I don't expect to see him doing that next year, but I think he kind of filled that third tall role today. Not too bad. We need him to do a role. And I do want to talk about Paul Curtis. He has been a little bit like Will Phil. He's done parts of the game really well this year, and there's been some big things that he needs to improve. I thought today his pressure was good, but he did a fantastic job of moving it on fast when he got it, say, 50 or 60 out, so that he could give Larkey those one-on-one opportunities. It was just great to see Curtis. Sure, he kicked his 2 goals, but he was also getting others involved, and I think that's probably something that he hasn't done as much this year. He's probably had 1 or 2 moments where you go, great, he's hit the ball on or he's had a big impact, but across a whole 120 minutes, how much of that has he done? So, the forward line and the efficiency inside 50, just the whole structure and the forward line was fantastic today. And again, the Suns weren't missing heaps in their back line. So Lukosius was missing, but he, is more of a rebounding centre-half back, you might call him. They had McAndrew back there. They had Collins there. they had players there, and they just didn't really have an answer for Larkey. He was so strong in the contest, and they tried to ragdoll him around a bit and then ended up giving away free kicks. So fantastic effort from the forward line and from the whole side in terms of getting the ball in there. And it was unrecognisable to what we've seen most of the year in terms of the way that the ball transitioned down the field, and then it, after the first quarter, essentially was locked in our forward line until we kicked a goal for the most part. Another one similar to this, we did a fantastic job of not going into our shells after making mistakes. I talked about the fact that we're not going to be perfect, and there were definitely times where we made errors today. I can specifically remember Tom Powell had a bad missed handball in the middle of the ground, turned it over, Gold Coast walked it up, and Mabior Chol kicked a nice goal. That is the cost of playing on at all costs sometimes. You're trying to put speed on the ball. Sometimes you run into trouble and you turn it over. I thought on the back of that, Powell did not go into his shell. He kept trying to play that style, and there was times where he looked like he had all the time in the world. He was just pausing and he didn't kick it forward and bomb long. He looked for a handball or a sideways kick so that we could hold possession. And yeah, I mean, that wasn't specific to him. I thought everyone probably, had a mistake or two today, but it didn't stop the way that we were trying to play. And I think that's what the good sides do. They back themselves, even if they've stuffed up the last one, they're gonna get the next one. And I thought those young mids did a fantastic job of that. Lazzaro, as I said earlier, probably his best AFL game this year. And part of that is that he's barely had an opportunity. He's played in the sub role, or he's played at half forward, but playing through that midfield, I thought early on he looked like he was adjusting to the pace of the game, but he made a few errors asking for handballs when he shouldn't have been. But eventually that chaining up through the middle with those three young mids, Powell, Phillips and Lazzaro, it looked really, really good. So I really liked the way that we didn't go into our shells. Then, I mentioned before, it wasn't a nail biter. I can't believe that at one point, I think there was 15 minutes to go in the last quarter, I said, oh my God, we've won it. And then the Suns kicked a couple and I thought, oh, here we go. But we slammed them in the end. Both our wins this year have been by under a goal. Obviously, the Freo game was arguably a lucky result, and then the West Coast were coming hard really at the end of that game. Last year, similarly, we fell over the line against the Tigers and the Eagles. So it's been a while since we've had a comfortable win. And we were challenged late. We didn't go into our shells. We kicked more goals to run over the top. We didn't start trying to kick it around and take time off the clock in a negative way. I think probably 5 or 6 minutes to go, there was a period there where we kicked it around a little bit just to regain a bit of composure and give ourselves some legs. And then we went run and gun again. So we stuck with the game plan. It was, to be honest, an un-North Melbourne-like performance in all the best ways. It was, as I've said a few times so far in the podcast, just unrecognisable because we didn't look worried by it. We just kept going. And I don't know, maybe part of that is having all of these younger players in there that just haven't been scarred by loss after loss after loss. Like, we take out Cunnington, Zeeble, McDonald from that back and midfield group, and LDU you could throw into that as well, actually. Zerha. These players have been around through the entirety of this poor period, this lean period, and maybe having all of these younger players in, like, sure, they've had a bad year, but they haven't necessarily had 3 or 4 bad years where it's all gone against them. So yeah, it was fantastic just to be able to watch the last 10 or so minutes and go, well, we've won this game. It's just going to be how much. And it was a bit of a how many can Larkey kick. He ended on 9. He nearly had 10. So yeah, that was fantastic. Another one a little bit in jest here, but Alex Sexton didn't magically pop out of nowhere and kick a bag. Every time that we play the Gold Coast, he's a fringe player, Alex Sexton. He's not a player that's a walk-up start for them every week, but he just seems to torch us every time. He played in the Gold Coast's VFL side earlier in the year against North and torched them as well. He just loves playing North Melbourne. But I didn't even know he was playing, to be honest. He was anonymous, didn't kick the goal, had 4 or 5 touches. So that was a nice little win for us. He's obviously, I couldn't tell you who played on him, but I also don't care because he had no impact. So cop that, Alex Sexton, I guess. And the last one, just the scenes after the game. I'd be surprised if there were many North Melbourne fans that turned off at the final siren and didn't watch the scenes after the game. It was just fantastic to see so many smiling faces. You know, we as fans sit here going, oh, again, we've lost 20 in a row. But we have to remember that, sure, we lose it. And then most of us go on with our weeks. And then, you know, we have our job or whatever we do, go to school. And then we rock up, you know, the next weekend and we hope. Whereas these players, they live it. They go into work, they've lost. They go into work, they're recovering after a loss. So it was fantastic to see so many happy people, and not just the players, obviously, like all the club staff and Sonia. Fantastic. It was great to see Ford and Tucker and Dawson copping the Gatorade spray out of the ground. I thought it was really... I think they were the only 3 that it was their first win for North Melbourne. Certainly Tucker and Dawson and Ford. We know it was kind of publicised that Ford had played in 20-odd games and hadn't had a win yet. So that was fantastic. They were doing their signing the footies and taking photos with fans after the game, and then the majority of the side was then ready to go into the rooms and sing the song. But Larkey, Mackay and Greenwood in particular spent a lot of time talking with fans and taking photos, which was fantastic to see. I think bit of that classic, you don't really get an opportunity to do that when you've lost. Typically, you're heading straight off after a loss, and I'm sure partly that's why they felt like they wanted to give back, because they haven't had a chance to do it this year. It's the last game of the year. But just you could see that, those 3 in particular spent a lot of time, and I think it's worth shouting out the fact that they were really invested in making sure those mostly young people were having a good time and getting a photo or having a quick conversation with them. Watch them going down to the rooms. Like, it was so much happiness. I thought it was interesting seeing Taron Thomas and Ben Mackay looking really happy together. I don't know what you want to read into that. But, you know, if you're a body language person, neither of those 2 looked like they were absolutely out the door. Watching them, the whole sort of club sing the song, it wasn't just the players, it was all the staff and the coaching group. It was just a really wholesome sort of 10 or 15 minutes after the game. And I'm going to caveat all of that by saying, I'm sure there are other club supporters looking at that going, what a bunch of nuffies, what a bunch of losers. And I get it, because if it was some other side doing it, I'd be thinking the same thing. But I just couldn't care less. It's what you play footy for, is that hour or so after a game, after a win, and they've been so few and far between. It was just really, heartwarming to see the way that everyone kind of had that relief almost, and it was a fantastic way to wrap up the year. Even though I would have loved to see that 10 or 15 weeks earlier, I think it is what it is. It was a great way to wrap up the season, particularly given, sure, the Suns had some players out, but we had a lot of players out as well. And I think at the end of the day, all this win is good for is for morale and for club spirit and for a bit of standard setting. Does not get us anything beyond that. No one in the footy world looking at us and going, oh, maybe North Melbourne aren't so terrible. But if you're wanting to keep a free agent, or if you're wanting to spruik that there's a bit of hope around the club, you do need the occasional win. And if that occasional win comes against the Gold Coast, who are probably 14th or 15th on the ladder, so be it. We've got to take the wins where we can get them. So that's all the positives and negatives. I did put out a tweet after the game, or I put out one during the game, just saying, how am I supposed to feel about this? And then I tweeted afterwards, or posted, because it's called X now. I keep forgetting that. Asking for some reactions. So I'm just going to go through a couple of those now. You'll see pretty clearly that there's the 2 sides to what people are thinking, but I think that's okay. I think feel how you feel. If you would prefer to have the number one draft pick as opposed to winning this game, then that's how you feel. Because the premierships is what we actually play for. We just need to keep banking these wins to work towards that. So in terms of the reactions, Billy Wardle said it was our best ball movement of the year easily. Played attacking instead of playing safe. No hat kicks out of defensive 50. Bergman makes us look like a better side. Turner and Dawson may have earned themselves another year. I think I would agree with all of that, Billy. Ball movement was fantastic. Bergman looked good. Turner and Dawson are interesting. I'll talk about Dawson in a minute, but I agree that they both had fantastic games. And then we go down to Fish 13. I'm not celebrating and are praying that West Coast get the win versus Adelaide. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, Fish, but I get it, mate. There was a small part of me that was kind of feeling the same way. Justin at Justin Street 89 couldn't enjoy the win, which is sad. Hopefully we didn't lose Reid, and now the AFL turn around and say no priority, no Sanders, no Reid will kill me. Look, I found it. I had to sort of coach myself to enjoy it. To be fair, Justin, but they're not going to completely throw away what they were going to give us based on this one match. Like, it does mean that we don't get pick one in the draft unless we trade up for it. But we also have to remember that Harley Reid's going to be an absolutely fantastic player, I'm sure. However, the midfield is the area that we do not need the most help in. So I'm not necessarily upset if we don't get Reid. I'll take him, don't get me wrong, but we need key defenders. We need a ruck. We need a small forward. We have other needs. Chris at Better Loosen Up 3 just says, love it. And I respect that. Left turn, Arden Street. Bittersweet. Happy the boys didn't lie down. Winning culture is far more important than a draft pick. Just wish we saw this earlier, especially to farewell Cunners and Zeebs. Also feel we may trade for Reid, which means we may lose Ports first now. Look, I'll talk more about what the drafting and trading might look like in future podcasts, I think, but I do agree, like I said earlier in the podcast, I wish that we'd seen some of this earlier. And you're right, it would have been great to farewell Cunners or Zeeble with a win. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do that, but I'm sure that both of those two would be looking at this going, what a fantastic way to end the year still. But I get it. Michael at Michael C0678. The feeling should be that you're happy with the win, be happy about Larkey kicking 9. The future is bright. Wanting your team to lose is actually quite sad. I'm certainly happy with the win and with Larkey kicking 9. I think, I get what you're saying, Michael. I think there's a difference between wanting the team to lose and being okay if the team loses. And I think that's probably what I went into the game with the perspective of. I was expecting to lose and I was kind of okay with it. But I did enjoy the win, which Fab Crit says, I very much enjoyed the win. Love that for you. Luke Sheen, loved the win. Obviously stoked with Larky's 9. Scott and Shees were great. Really happy with Bergman in the back line. Goda's best game. Phillips and Powell were both really good as well. Agree with all of that, Luke. I've got nothing further to add. Mark BJ says, bloody enjoying the win. Couldn't agree more. Rousseauitz sending me a few thumbs up and perfect emojis. David at Kurbanavich. It was a great win for the players in the park. It did, however, add complexities to the list management and recruiting department, and I think that is a good way of putting it. It adds complexities. It doesn't completely throw everything out, but it does change some thinking potentially. Nicolau Effie, boys played with heart and for each other. Haven't seen them go in hard to support each other in I can't remember how long. Definite shin boners out there today. Yeah, look, I don't love the term shin boner, but there was a bit of shin boner about the performance for sure. And I think, we've played with effort all year, but it hasn't always been effort that's been rewarded. And I think yesterday it was rewarded. Ian King, sorry if I'm getting some of these names wrong. He's at Asian Stallion. Our back six did really well. No hat kicks. Although Dawson didn't get much of the ball, he did better than Elmac. And I think, Dawson's not in the side to rack up possessions. He's in there to negate. But he did do a great job of negating for the most part, I thought. Paul Robb enjoyed the win. It shows improvement, integrity, belief, and potential. Gold Coast looked flat. We look switched on. Tanking is for losers. Great to see the boys playing with freedom and enjoying themselves. Agree with all of that, Paul. I think It was fantastic to see that integrity and belief and definitely potential. Piercy, extremely happy. It's been a rough year, but to take a final performance like that into the preseason will be massive. I agree. I think it's probably less so the preseason, but the postseason, I think there's just a bit more, you go in feeling a bit happier. So agree with that, Piercy. Al Liptrot, our backline looked more composed and more damaging on the rebound without Zeeble and McDonald. I'll enjoy the win. I wondered the same thing looking at that L. I think obviously Zeeble is the one that won't be coming back. But yeah, McDonald's an interesting one in terms of how he fits in next year. He's in our best 23, so I'm not trying to drop him, but I do wonder if there's a role change potentially. Orange Parado just says vindication, and he's got a gif of someone doing a fantastic celebration as well. So mostly positive vibes there from those people. On my other tweet, I'm not going to read all these out, but there were a few that were less happy. Ruboy was angry, sending some angry emojis. Nick Larkey's set shot, that's Nick Ansell, friend of the show. Good wins more valuable. They need to learn how to win. I couldn't agree with that, Nick, more. I think the win was super important. Jane at Jane Terrence 07. Joy. Why are you even asking? Just watch the replay a couple of times and you will have the answer. It's in your heart. No need to ask us. And that is true. I think I was joyful in the end. I just had to coach myself to get there. CH at Catherine Hajic 1. I don't even want to watch it. Why they're doing this. So you can see there's a few of the people like that just were really expecting and wanting to win. Someone, Ian Drury 10, is devastated. Sean Elderson, unsure if that win was worth it. There's definitely two sides to that, and I'm sorry if I didn't read out your comment. There was probably 30 more that were along those same lines, but I think by the sound of it, most fans are happy with the win, and I think that is how we should feel after a win like that. Let's look ahead to the final little pieces of news from the week. Not a lot to talk about. The VFL is happening right now. It's happening in an hour or so. They've got their wildcard match against Melbourne, or Casey, and they need to win that to get into the finals proper. We lost to Casey by about 15 points earlier in the year, so, we're thereabouts. I just think, given we had a lot of our VFL regulars playing for the AFL side yesterday, such as Dawson, such as Lazzaro, such as Goder and Bergman have been there in spurts. I do wonder how well they're going to go. Anyway, we'll see. I think it'd be great if they could get into the finals and extend their season for another week or two. But I think they're probably up against it, just given they unfortunately lost a couple too many at the end of the year and sort of ran out of steam a little bit. And I thought I would talk about Dawson here at the end. I could have had him in the positives. I just wonder what it means, because he hasn't got a game all year, except for this one game that he got. I thought he was fantastic defensively. He didn't look out of place at all. He's playing against the Gold Coast, so it was Mabiot Chol and Levi Casbolt up there as the big players. King wasn't playing, so, they're not absolute out-and-out stars by any stretch, but I thought Mackay and Dawson both played well. And I just wonder, I thought for sure, based on the fact that he hadn't been getting a game, he was going to get cut. And I still think there's a chance for what it's worth. I do wonder if, seeing him perform like that, there's a chance that he does stay on the list. Having Zeeble out, having McDonald out, that we needed defensive options to come in. But, Bonner has been that person earlier in the year. They've chucked Dawson in. I don't know how much of it was let's give him a farewell versus let's see what he's like. I can't believe he hasn't played earlier, because, he was fantastic. He defended really well, had a couple of good one-on-one wins. He's not going to be that player. He's not going to be Darcy Moore. He's not going to be rebounding and out. I don't know that he's in a position where he's going to be coming off his man all the time and, creating third man up spoils. But I think what he was in the side to do, he did. So, it probably all hinges on what happens with Mackay, I guess. We're all still expecting Mackay to leave, or at least that's what the media is expecting. And, generally they expect things for a reason. To me, if Mackay leaves, I think Dawson would be a great one to keep around, even if we delist him and then we re-rookie him. I don't think that would hurt because we know what he is. It's kind of the devil, like we can't really, unless we do draft Curtin, I don't think there's really any key position players that are going to be drafted and play and be successful immediately. And we saw how long it took Ben Mackay to be a successful defender. He's only played 70-odd games, and not much of that's been through injuries. A little bit of injury, but a lot of, in the early years, we just had to develop him whilst Tarrant and the like were still strong. So just an interesting wait and watch, I guess. We'll see if there's any delistings straight away or what it looks like. We certainly know there's going to be a lot of delistings at North just based on the fact we've got to cut down our list. So there's going to be cuts. We'll see by the time I'm recording my next podcast if there have been any as yet. But yeah, looking at today's game, I think Dawson changed my mind personally, and I think it'll be interesting to see if he's changed the mind of list management at all or not. I guess we will see from the exit meetings over the next couple of days. That brings us to the end. That season done. So last match review all wrapped up. Obviously, there's no game next week for us. No AFL games at all. So there'll be no more games to review. I'll just talk a little bit about what you can expect in the off season. So there's definitely going to be some season review stuff over the next couple of weeks. I might look at rating each player's season and look at potentially what we could expect from them next year. So you can expect that over the next couple of weeks. Then we'll move more into a bit of a trade mode. What are we going to look to do? I'll certainly do a bit of a trade wrap up when the trade period is finished. So we'll see what the cadence for episodes looks like. It might still be around weekly. It might be a little bit less frequent than that. We'll just see, how much there is to talk about, I guess. And then, moving into the draft, I'll look at, once all that trading and stuff is done, we can have a look at what our actual draft hand's looking like and who we might like to pick. And then, obviously, I will review the selections that we do make because it's going to be interesting either way, I think. Like, we're looking at Reid, Curtin, Watson, McKercher, Sanders. Like, there's heaps of players there that we potentially are looking at, and we're not going to get them all. So there's going to be plenty to talk about with that. I'm also hoping to get a special guest on for an interview. That'll definitely be post-finals finishing. So I might keep that one under wraps a little bit, but he's not a North Melbourne person, but I think he could have some interesting insights on North Melbourne and on AFL in general. So stand by for that. I'm hoping to get that out maybe in October or November. And I think that's about it. That's what we can expect, or you can expect, over the coming weeks. Certainly not going to stop pumping out the content. I am really excited to have a look at what transpires over the trade period, because really that starts ramping up as soon as the season proper, like the finals are done. I think it's finals finish, and then there's about a week until the trade or the free agency period starts going. So there'll be plenty to talk about. And also the AFLW starting next weekend. North Melbourne's got a game down in Tassie, I think. Pretty sure. Let me check that. Yeah, North Melbourne's got a game against St Kilda down in Tassie on next Sunday for the AFLW. I don't plan to podcast about the AFLW at this stage. Just to be honest, I don't know enough about it. I haven't really followed it closely in the past. I've been a bit of a casual watcher. Like, I know a couple of the big hitters. I know Jazzy Garner is a gun. But beyond that, my knowledge is a little lacking. So I do plan to follow it more closely this year, and potentially, particularly if we're going well, I might look at covering a little bit of it. But I also don't want to podcast about something that I don't know a lot about. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But I will have I'll cast my eye over the AFLW this season a bit closer, and could potentially do some podcasting about that as that season goes on. We'll see. And that's it. That's all for this podcast. That's all for the home and away season for 2023. Just a big thank you for all the support over the season. All those people sharing and retweeting and reviewing and doing all of that stuff for the podcast. I really appreciate it. I know that it's probably boring listening to me ask for retweets and follows and reviews all the time, but it really does make a difference to surface the show and to get it out there to more North fans. So I really appreciate everyone. I appreciate even those people that just are having a listen. I thought I'd give this a crack at the start of the season. I missed the jump because I was sort of tossing and turning about whether or not I do it or not. So I really appreciate everyone for jumping on board. There's plenty of other good North Melbourne podcasting out there if you're interested. The Further North podcast is worth a listen with Josh, and #Kangaroos with Dean's also fantastic. So, I think we're all in this together, the North Melbourne community. It's not about taking sides. I think there's some fantastic stuff to listen to out there. So I do really appreciate everyone listening to the podcast. And there's still plenty more to come this year, but it probably will slow down a touch. So I plan to go full steam ahead and continue podcasting next year, don't you worry, and hopefully we can pick up more than 3 wins next year. So with all of that being said, I'm not certain yet when I'll speak to you next, probably around a week or so. We might start doing a bit of a season review, but in any case, we'll enjoy a week off of the AFL. We'll get stuck into the AFLW, and we'll, after today, by the time you listen to this, the first week of finals will be set. So it'll be interesting to see if the GWS are able to get in, or if the Dogs sneak in another time. That's all from me. Have a fantastic week. Enjoy that winning feeling. Wear your North Melbourne gear loudly and proudly. We haven't got to do it all year. As always, go North. Thanks for listening to another episode of North Pod. Please subscribe to the podcast on your app and give me a rating or a review if you can. I'd really appreciate it. You can find me on all social media at North Pod Show. That's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Threads, you name it, I'm there. I'll see you next episode.